In this video, we're going to take a more nuanced look at different types of variables so that it's not just categorical and quantitative. When we talk about quantitative, a lot of different things with numbers tend to get lumped in there, but there's a couple specific things that we should keep an eye on. One is that it has an absolute zero. So, for example, if you think of weight, 10 pounds is twice as heavy as 5 pounds. That means that 0 pounds means that you have nothing, there is no weight. In the same way, 10 degrees, if it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside, it is not twice as hot as it would be if it's 5 degrees Fahrenheit. 0 is not an absolute zero. For those of you that have done some chemistry stuff and you know about the Kelvin scale, that actually does have an absolute zero. When molecules stop moving, it is 0 degrees. So our scales for temperature don't do that. Another one is constant interval. That's very closely related. What it means is that if you subtract two numbers, that the difference is always the same. So for example, 10 degrees is 5 degrees more than 5 degrees. 20 degrees is 5 degrees more than 15. So 20 minus 15 is 5, 10 minus 5 is 5. The difference, the gap is the same. Or a simple example here, the gap from 1 to 2 is the same as the gap from 5 to 6. Where that's not always the case is when you have rank this from 1 to 5. That would be a case where people who choose 5 and people who choose 4 might have only a slight difference, but the people who choose 4 and the people who choose 3 might have a bigger gap. So that's what it means to have a constant interval. Now let's look in Google Forms at how we would create something that captures true quantitative data. The question I created in here is how many siblings do you have? And the help task I put, in case there's any confusion, it said count half and step siblings as one each, so as one sibling each. And the question type here, I'm not going to be checkboxes, I'm actually going to want to do text. Google Forms doesn't have a clear way to do quantitative data, so we're going to use a text box. But one thing that they added that is kind of slick is that you can do something called data validation. And when I check that, I can require that whatever you type in that box is not anything, but it has to be a number. I can also have some rules about the text, but in this case it's a number, and I could say a number greater than or equal to 0. So what that does is it forces the person not only to type in a number, but they can't say they have -1 siblings. They could, under this system, still type in something like 2.76. We can't stop them with this rule here, but it does give us at least a little bit of control. And if we make it a required question, now when they type in the box, they have to enter in something. I hinted at it a second ago, but another characteristic of variables that you might want to look for is that there's an inherent order. For example, 3 is bigger than 2. If you have a 1 to 5 scale, you know that 3 is a bigger number and 5 is the biggest number on that scale. There's an order there. But you also could have words there. It could be like categories, where you could say hate and like. You could say hate, dislike, neutral, like, love. That could be your scale, and there's an inherent order in those words. In the same way that if you said the words freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, we can translate those into numbers. They have an inherent order. We know what those words mean. And so they are ordered even though they act kind of like categories at the same time. So to do that in Google Forms, question might be, how much do you like my survey? Your question type, you're going to go down and choose scale. And what I found is that 1 to 5 is the best scale. If you have any more than that, it tends to push people into only choosing certain numbers, and if you do any less than that, people tend to get mad, like, what, I can only like it, love it, or hate it? That's not enough options for some people. So 1 to 5 seems to be a good balance, and you could put hate it on one end, love it on the other, and you see this scale here where it kind of helps people understand what they're answering. Another variation on that is to choose grid, and if you choose grid, your rows could be different attributes of the survey. So how much do you like my survey? My name, Then along your columns you could say something like hate it, dislike, neutral, like love, for example. And when you finish that, what it does is it gives you options going across that way. Depending on how you're designing the survey, you could require that there's one per row or not require that, and there's some other settings that you can do as well. Continuing on our spectrum of variables, another characteristic to look for is that each category is unique. For example, you think of any categorical variable, blue is not purple. If you have unique categories, they don't overlap with each other. 3 is not 5. It could be numbers, it could be categories. Typically going to show up as a multiple choice type of question. So, for example, what is the best football team in any league? And for my question type, I would pick multiple choice, and option 1, Packers, obviously. Option 2, Badgers, Wisconsin Badgers. Other options, pretty much irrelevant, right? So people taking the survey would have to pick one of those two options. You can see how multiple choice can be limiting, because you might look at this and be like, I don't want to pick any of them, but I have to choose one. So that's one of the issues with multiple choice. A slight variation on that is choose from a list, where you see a drop-down list here, and it will just let you choose from it, but it works fundamentally the same. And then checkboxes, where you could choose both of them, one of them, or neither. Last one is simple open response. So if you're looking at a question where you don't really know what people are going to answer, you just want to see what they say, you can create a new question and use either text, or if you think they're going to say a lot, paragraph text, and you could give them some sort of prompt, and then they can type whatever they want in that text box there. So a quick review, most open is that kind of open response text question. If you're looking at categorical data, you have to have unique options to choose from. On the other end of the spectrum, we're going to skip ordered for now. On the other end of the spectrum, quantitative data, the kind that we would do quantitative analysis on, find means and medians, things like that. Good attributes is that they have an absolute 0, or at the very least they have a constant interval, that the differences between the numbers are the same, because you can still do a lot of quantitative analysis when you have a constant interval. The ordered data is something that's a little bit weird to analyze, because in some ways it behaves like categorical data, in other ways it behaves more like quantitative data, because it is numbers. You can take an average of the scores from 1 to 5 that people give, but is it a true mean? That's harder to say. So you're kind of treading in gray zone when you deal with the ordered. The open response don't even fit within a category, but if you were to go back after people responded and say, oh, based on their comment, I think that they like us versus love us versus hate us, or whatever it might be, you could lump responses into categories if you spent more time afterwards. So some of these kind of shift into different areas depending on what you're doing. So you do have to be careful when you get into some of those gray zones.